Hello and welcome to 9-Inch Charge. Welcome to the Old World Christmas special. The boys are back in town. We've got the band back together and we're ready to rock and roll dice. Or just chat about
How
Warhammer.
long did you spend coming up with that?
Well, about 2 minutes before this. Whilst I was waiting, the 9 minutes that it took for you guys to get on the stream.
I was eating.
It's a strong start, Dan. It's a strong start.
Okay, so of course, everybody will remember Dan from the Empire episodes. Welcome, Dan.
Hello.
Obviously, Dan from the 2Ps there. And Jeremy from Cafe, not to be mistaken with the Dark Lord Malkith himself.
The similarities are many.
And today we're just going to have a bit of a ramble, really. We're just going to talk about memories that we've got, because us three, we all used to play Warhammer Fantasy Battles together in our school club and continue to play right the way up until the end times, where sadly, Jeremy, you took a bit of a bow out of the hobby, didn't you? But we're hoping to get you back, and me and Dan have continued to play Age of Sigmar.
You'll get me back for the old world, I'm sure.
Forsky, thank you for joining the stream. Welcome, mate. So, of course, just a quick shout out to the Christmas charity raffle. The first thing I'd say is thank you so much to everybody who has donated. We're pretty close to reaching our target of £500 now for the new sibling school to raise money for children who are locked in. If you haven't yet checked it out, check the link in the description. There's all kinds of cool prizes, start collecting bots of your choice, chance to be on one of these streams, various models, rules for skirmish games. Tickets start at £5 and all proceeds go to the new sibling school. All right, so without further ado, shall we begin?
Can I open my beer now?
Yeah, you can open your beer now.
I'm just. I'm
Is
worried.
that a sprue cutter?
It's the Games Workshop £20 ones as well. So I hope this doesn't go badly wrong. Because I don't really have a bottle opener, but I got given this today, and I was like, oh, proper job. And I think, Christ, I mean, crikey. Well, in honor of the fallen, I felt that proper job was about right, because obviously Jethro's left us and made me very sad.
I thought you were talking about Glade Guard.
I will never drink to Glade Guard other than to their demise.
Right with you there.
The irony
As they
is,
drank to yours many times.
Yeah, I never had an issue with them in Warhammer Fantasy. It's one of the few units I didn't have an issue with, because it actually stood there in a block and you could give it a whopping rather than hiding in the trees. It's when they teleported into Age of Sigmar with their -3 rend, which, to be honest, would be pretty much, run of the mill these days. But back then it was just a bit much.
The slow trudge across the battlefield while elves fall around you like 9-pins as the Glade Guard shoot at you, and then have the sheer nerve to retreat backwards, so it takes even longer to get to them.
Well, this takes me to one of my first memories I want to share, because witch elves were always one of the softer targets, and obviously you loved your witch elves, Jeremy, didn't you? And you used to take quite a lot of them, but bless them, they did only have a 6+ armor save.
They had 0 armor save. There was no save there.
And they did fall to arrows quite easily, but
they flew to a stiff breeze. In fairness,
they were an incredibly expensive pack when they came out, weren't they? They still are the same price as when they came out like a decade ago. They're still £35 for 10. And obviously, we know it can be an expensive hobby if you're young and you're playing in your school club and you've got to save £35 up for one box of models. But I still don't think that it excuses this kind of behaviour, Jeremy.
I thought we were going to bring this up.
So this here is your Christmas present. I have sourced a knockoff Lego Pegasus. If you want to tell us about this, Jeremy.
Yeah, of course. So I think you've kind of already hinted at this, is that we started obviously doing the hobby when we were like, in our early teens, and so money was a little bit tight at the time. So we didn't always have our ambitions. Sometimes outstretched our budgets, and so sometimes we would just go. Well, I say we. I actually just really mean me, don't I? Because I don't think anyone else did this. But I would just proxy with so little effort made at all. But I think that using a Lego Lego dragon as a Black Pegasus was one of my more inspired substitutions. I mean, it's roughly the same size, shape, color. My worst one was literally just trying out vampire counts and having a blank base that just had vampire bats written over it. So I thought the dragon was probably a step up from that lowest of low levels.
There's a real power to an inability to feel shame, isn't there?
Yeah,
I don't think.
inevitably.
I know you've bought a prop there, but I don't. To be fair to you, at times you did go and buy the correct miniature and try and get it built and ready for the game, even if that meant utilising sellotape.
Yeah, well,
to
this is the
hold
other problem.
together Marathi. And actually, in fairness, right, well, I laugh, but I think there was a level of skill there because you actually got it together in the shape. It wasn't just a ball of sellotape. So yeah.
My memory in my head of it just being more like a bit of tumbleweed of sellotape with like some wings sticking out of it. But that was the other problem, was that it would be the weekend, so we'd go and spend whatever money we had in Games Workshop, and then our club was always on a Monday night. So the time between purchasing the model and assembling it was a little bit tight. So some creative assembly was sometimes required.
Oh, I can remember that. I can remember when I bought my first Forest Dragon, and me and Dan were pinning it the weekend before the Games Club. Oh my goodness, that model was a nightmare to put together.
To be honest, all of those dragons, like, while they were cool, like they had that when you had the dragons with the classic S shape, and they were just anyone that says they miss metal models clearly has got the rose tinted glasses, because whilst I do like a metal model, like when it's a one piece maybe, but oh my goodness.
The amount of time you'd spend just with your hands holding a metal model in place, just praying that the glue was going to set the metal together and just not glue your fingers to the metal.
Yeah. And then you had things like your bolt throwers that were just like, a sadist came up with that. Like all those really fine pieces to put together with super glue, and that would just invariably just go and fall apart again.
I mean, I thought that was bad, but I think a steam tank possibly must be the worst.
Yeah, mine fell apart, and I never rebuilt it.
Well, luckily they're plastic now.
Yeah.
The only thing I do quite like about metal is that it is so much easier to strip the paint off. So when you look back at your painting of 20 years ago and you go, what was I on? At least you can now go and scrub it back. Start again.
So are you going to be doing any of that, Jeremy? What are you going to be doing with your Dark Elf army? Because
I stripped a lot of the models back. So all my Corsairs, I took the original paint off and started repainting them, and then got distracted. But I meant to be traveling up to see my my brother, and he's got a whole new Skaven army painted up, and he's made it very clear that I have to have painted models to go up against it. So there's an incentive there for me to do some painting over the Christmas and New Year.
Absolutely right. So, of course, we used to play in our school club, and I got so many good memories of playing in that club. And then that eventually became Cross Swords Gaming Club, which is down in Lee Mill in Devon. And Cross Swords is a fantastic club because it's in a pub. It's great to be able to get a pint of beer. And the blue cheese burger I have distinct memories of. Playing games of Warhammer Fantasy Battles, drinking a few beers, and then... Do you remember the time that one of the members of the club, Larry, we tried to bowl him down the Skittles alley? Like, he took a run up and then a jump, and we tried to slide down the Skittles alley of the pub. This is where you get distracted from the hobby, but this is I guess this is.
I remember videoing it. I don't have it, but I had this. The phone was like, can't remember what it was, but it was one of the ones where it flipped open. That's coming back in now. Those flip phones, isn't it? But yeah, I do remember that. But I remember like he ran, jumped, and just went and smacked his head on the thing. Bless it. Oh, poor dude. Yeah. I do remember one of my birthdays. I was playing against another Empire player. I was playing Owen, but I drank too much tribute and it all went terribly wrong. And that's my excuse. I'm sticking to it.
The time that it went terribly wrong because of drink was the time that you were still manager of Games Workshop Bristol, Dan. And we played. Paul came over.
Yeah, so Paul, who worked for me when I ran and Bath, he came over, and we were going to play what's it called? Storm of Magic. And in Storm of Magic, you could summon like arcane fulcrums that your wizards could stand on. And but on the same evening, the girl I was with at the time decided she didn't want to be with me anymore. And that conversation happened. And then the only like appropriate response to that was to drink copious amounts of alcohol and play Warhammer. And then in the morning, Dan and I came downstairs and went into the room that we'd set aside for gaming. And the table was there was just models scattered everywhere. It was a total mess. But right in the middle was a can of Carling with a wizard on top. So that was a good time. That was good. I like that. That was funny. I always remember, like from playing you, Jeremy, just being like terrified of your cold ones with their fear, but then invariably you would just roll and fail a stupidity test, and they just sort of amble around, and then it just felt a bit like mean. It almost doesn't feel like a victory if you win the battle because the cold ones just decide to like amble.
My main memory, well, it always happened once. I think my memory was always fearing your Hellblaster volley gun, which just seemed to be this lethal thing that just would point in the direction, and then suddenly you'd remove everything opposite it.
Yeah. Originally, it didn't need to hit either. I remember when they changed that, and you had to roll to hit once you generated your shots. That was a dark day, especially trying to play Dan's Wood Elves, which was just like minus 307 to hit or something. And it was just like flipping heck, what's going on? And I remember going for a stage where I was like mortars. I decided mortars were the way forward. So I had 3 mortars and was just trying to like mortar the woods flat. That didn't work. Unfortunately, nothing worked. Stupid Wood Elves. They just
you went full Vietnam there, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, broken arrow. They were I always thought Wood Elves though, they just played Warhammer but 40k styly, and it just didn't seem fair. It just annoyed me greatly. But then sorry, go on.
I was going to say, this is what I think we had said on another podcast, that Wood Elves always felt like a 40k army that had gone to the old world on holiday and just got lost.
Yeah, definitely. I think
I'm trying to find them now, but I can't see them. I did find there was an old forum, azrai.org, which was the Wood Elf forum at the time before social media, and I put some battle reports of games that we have played together on there back in the day, but I'm just trying to find them now and I can't see it. But this is what happens when you don't prepare for a stream, I suppose. Suffice it to say, I only posted the battle reports that I won. So,
yeah.
So apologies for that. If I do find them,
100%.
Oh, there's no point posting anything else, is there?
Yeah.
Do you remember we went on a mission, didn't we, Jeremy, to rebase your army? And then they flipping killed the world. Like,
yeah, literally, it's kind of like a month later said, "Oh, we're switching to round base. Let's do it again." I was like, "No, I'm out of it."
Yeah, that was a shame. It's funny because now obviously Well, I was always a bit excitable, so when Age of Sigmar came out, I just jumped straight in anyway, and I love it. But I remember getting really frustrated with the end times because you had like Nagash came along and he was amazing, and then they had a load of new Chaos models and they were amazing, and then they brought out the Kane book and there wasn't a single new model, and actually they killed Atharian the Grim off, and I was just like raging. I was like, this is outrageous. What is going on? Although to be fair, he came back and is just amazing. So as a spirit with just armor, that's very good.
It is a nice model.
Yeah, I do think like the thing we were saying about Wood Elves playing like 40k. I think that kind of exposed one of the things that was a bit frustrating, and I'll be interested to see how they approach it, or whether they even feel it needs changing with Warhammer the Old World. Was like, it was really easy, I found, in fantasy to lose the game or to play a game and actually have no real part in it or impact at all, because you were outmaneuvered, outshot, and all you did was spent the time paying double your movement to try and turn left or turn right.
I'm not having it.
Away.
I'm not. You don't like. You just remember the end of 8th edition. All right, we had Hagbane arrows and True Flight arrows and Arcane Bodkins, but you do not know what it was like. Since not having a book between the beginning of 6th edition and the end of 8th edition, and actually, if you remember, there was a long time where my army didn't really have a lot of Glade Guard because it had to have monstrous infantry, so I had to take those disgusting Treekin models, and as many tree men as I could bundle in to remain somewhat competitive. And I think it kind of, and then obviously at the end they were just disgusting.
Yeah, I remember actually refusing to play you. I played you twice, and I was like, no, tone down your army. We're not playing you.
I don't remember. I mean, this probably says more about my tactical skill than the game, but I don't recall games which I won against you. Not until towards the end of 8th edition when I won Half Army. I just remember, like my Empire, I don't think I ever won against you. I just remember trying all sorts of things. Bombarding you with mortars was one game. Throwing magical fireballs at you was another game. Having a whopping great unit of swordsman masters with the Griffin standard and the Laurels of Victory, and having like plus 17 combat resolution, so that if you ran in, you run away was another game. None of that worked. None of that ever worked. But then I guess we didn't play loads in the sort of middle of the editions. We sort of played, didn't we, when we were in Cross Swords, and then there would have been a gap of like 4 years when I went off and was working for Games Workshop. Interestingly, coming back to the Witch Owls, and they were 35 quid. I remember when I was training at the time in Stockholm, when the great swords went to plastic, and they came out, and they were £25 for 10. And I remember like a week later or something, Games Workshop had to put out an official internal communication to the retail staff to confirm that was actually the real price. And then went on sort of there was like a whole training session back in Nottingham about how the value of the stuff you made the model with, be it plastic or resin or metal, wasn't the point, and actually that's not what drove what the cost was. So that just shows how big a thing it was when it came out. It was like, oh my goodness, because especially in 8th, you had to have massive units, didn't you?
Yeah. But that's another memory of mine is I had a Lizard Man army, and I didn't. Everybody knows Skinks are the best unit in the Lizard Man army, but I didn't want Skinks. I wanted Saurus Warriors, and I had 80 of them. So I had 2 hordes of 40, one either flank, and in the middle, I had my Slan in a unit of 25 Temple Guard. And that was my other army in 8th edition. And I can remember it takes a long time to set these up because I didn't have them all magnetized like I would now, like already in their tray, ready to go. I had to set them all up and it took a long time to set them all up. And I was playing against Tom, who had orcs and goblins. And it took me a long time to get the army done, but we were ready to go. And in the first turn, he cast, was it Bad Moon? And it was like it's the large template, and it went all the way across the length of the table over every single one of my models. Everybody takes an initiative test or is slain, and all of the Saurus are initiative 2. and it took longer to set up the game than it did for us to play it.
But that's okay. You got a second game out of that in that case. Start again.
I think I was just so demoralised. I was just like, do you know what? Right, fine. I'm taking them one at a time. Putting them back in the case. Because, of course, back in those days, the cases, everybody had the carry cases with like the slots in, didn't they? And you'd put them in one at a time. Whereas now, I think a big box, a big magnetised box is the way to go. But, Ben in the chat, thank you, Ben, for what you're saying there. Wood Elves of GW's unloved child spent most of 6th edition in ravening hordes and a white dwarf list. See, I told you. Thank you, Ben.
Rightly so.
I'm still gonna back up Bretonians who never got out of 6th edition and stayed stuck in there.
Oh
yeah, but that's because when they were released, they absolutely broke the game. Because obviously, we know we were talking about your Cold One Knights, Jeremy. That cavalry was just always the thing because it could outcharge anything, and when it went in to charge, it was devastating. And and in that time, if you wiped out the front rank, then they couldn't attack you back, and you'd pretty much just auto win. And then when they introduced flying Pegasus Knights, I can remember the outrage of people in the gaming community just thinking, what am I going to do? What can be done against this unit? And at the time, well, cannons, I think, is an answer, isn't it? But at the time, there was a lot of armies that didn't know what to do about them. And I think, they had their heyday then, and then that's why, I think.
It's a shame because or I don't know if it's still there, but there was an army for a long time up in Warhammer World that had been rebased for Age of Sigmar, and it looked really nice. Bretonian army looked really good.
They do look
I
nice
had a Bretonian army for Age of Sigmar, very briefly.
You did? It had dudes. Did it have dudes riding pigs, or was it just pigs?
Oh, that was when I expanded it. So I expanded it to be because this was when Age of Sigmar didn't have any rules. I know we're getting a bit off topic, but I had a Bretonian army, and then I painted up ogres and a giant in the same heraldry. But they're from the destruction faction. But I thought they'd be cool, like allies or mercenaries or something like that. And then I decided I wanted squigs, but I found a miniatures company that made a pig farmer, and they had pigs that they were shoeing along. And one of the pigs was had a bad leg and had like a wheel instead of a leg or something and things. And I was going to have them, but it was it was more of a kind of, I was just going for an aesthetic that I wanted. And then I was trying to shoe rules in sort of where I could, really. But Bretonians is an army I'd love to see back to the old world. And I think they've got to do that. The fact that they led the announcement and the map with a map of Bretonia tells you that, they just, if they don't do it now, they never will. But
it'll be really weird, wouldn't it? Yeah.
I'm hoping that's stuff. Jeremy, I found a battle report of us playing a game.
Oh, well, on your Wood Elf forum?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
So, the title is 2,000 points against our dark brethren. Played this game yesterday. Tinkered with the list, dropped 2 scouts to allow for the Moonstone Hidden Ways. Forgot to get the eagle out of the loft, and finally decided on high magic. And your list was a level 4 dark sorceress with a dispel scroll, 10 repeater crossbowmen with shields, 28 corsairs as your mage bunker, 28 witch elves, 2 units of 5 dark riders, 1 unit of 5 doomfire warlocks, 5 shades, a hydra, and 4 bolt throwers.
Of course.
And we played this game in January of 2013.
Oh no.
So 4 bolt throwers.
And this is the report. I deployed to negate his vanguard with my scouts, managed to get the first turn, decided to focus shooting on his fast units, leaving the 2 blocks of infantry and Hydra to the second turn. Turn 1 shooting, I took out 3 out of the 4 bolt throwers, a couple of shades, half a unit of fast cavalry, and the Hydra fled the table.
You know what? I think I remember the bolt throwers going down on turn 1. I do remember that. I don't remember anything else about it.
In the next turn, Tempest took out half the Witch Elves. We called it after my turn 3. He had 10 crossbowmen, less than half a unit of Corsairs, and 4 Witch Elves left. I had lost 3 scouts and 2 Wild Riders.
That might have been the game where I just put stuff down when I'm not playing you again if you take such a list.
So was that 8 then?
Yeah, because that would have been the bolt throwers would have been the Hagbane arrows, because for whatever reason the poison rule was the poison rule. So it doesn't matter what you're going up against. You could poison a war machine. You know, a steam tank could get poisoned on a 6. And that's what you would do. You'd shoot into the war machines and fish for 6s, and every 6 was a wound on it. Whereas before, you would like have to roll a 4+, whatever, if it is on the crew or not, and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But Hagbane arrows just let you chew through. But it wasn't. The thing is it wasn't really a tournament list. It was quite a specific list. No, because we didn't really play in tournaments. We played each other. So every game we play against each other, we kind of try and tailor our lists to the opponent, which I suppose is why I'm trying to find what my list was, what I took.
What did you have, like a favorite magic item in fantasy then? Either of you, Jeremy, Power Fist?
Oh yeah, mine was the what was it called? Was it like the Claw of Darkness or something? Which was definitely a 40k Power Fist that had found its way through the warp, and then you had an elf with strength 8 glove, which
that was off the Shadows, wasn't it? Albion.
Yeah, the Dark Shadows Albion campaign.
Yeah. I have to say Van Horseman's Speculum. Do you remember that one?
That was good. That flipped your stats, didn't it?
That's right, yeah. So you could just give it to Joe, the warrior priest, or whatever, or even a unit champion if you had that option. I'm not sure that they could actually take it because they couldn't get access to the item. And then you just swapped. I think you swapped like weapon skill, strength, toughness, and attacks, or something like that, or initiative maybe. So that was always quite good fun.
I liked the Moonstone of Hidden Ways was always my favorite. Because I'd always play an MSU style army. So I'd have lots of little units, 5 of this, 5 of that, 10 of that. But I'd have a big mage bunker. And that would always be like the bait, I suppose. And I'd try to funnel people down the middle of the table towards this bait and send the Wild Riders and Scouts and things around the side. But as soon as they got to it, the Moonstone of Hidden Ways meant they could teleport back to the other side of the table.
I also quite liked your like Acorn of Ages, which was sort of was like a hand grenade that grew a forest, which was also fun.
Yeah.
There was a Lizardman item that I liked. I can't remember what it was called, but it was like an egg, and you'd like tap it on the top with your spoon, like a hard-boiled egg. And what would come out of it, you'd roll a dice and you'd just see what would come out of it, and it might be like just nothing. It might be empty, or it might be like a little dragon might come out of it and start like breathing fire and chomping on people and like do like a load of wounds to people. I thought that was quite like a fun item, but it was a bit swingy. There's better ones to like concentrate the magic of your slams and stuff, but I
think it'll be great like using contrast paint in fantasy now, and like actually being able to knock out big units if they go down that route, which I imagine they will.
Well, Tom's had great success in the stream we did with Cult of Paint. He painted 3 models in an hour.
Yeah,
and based them with contrast paint.
And like he painted them in Hockland, which was the colours of my Empire when I did Empire. And I can remember they just took ages and ages and ages to paint.
This is my effort from the stream. I painted these. These are 5th edition High Elves, and these are the first models that I ever owned. I a box of high elves before I had any wood elves, but then I swapped to wood elves quite quickly. But I painted these up for the stream just
Didn't
because
they
I
come
like
on the
them.
same sprue? You get a sprue
Yeah.
with both of them on.
Yeah, you'd get 4 of one and 4 of the other back when 4 was the unit standard.
Oh, yeah. Do you know, Empire Knights were never ever sold any different than that. Despite the game changing, they always came in 8s.
But there are still hangovers from that now because dryads come in 16s.
Also, the regiments do, don't they? Still,
but
I guess it's because the sprues were 4s, weren't they?
Dryads come. If this is a tip for anybody who's collecting Sylvaneth or anybody wants a unit of 20, is they also come with the little forest spites, and you can base up 4 of them into your unit as unit fillers, and then you get a unit of 20.
Unit fillers, not used enough, I don't think, when I was playing anyway. I mean, I started using, so you've got some like seagulls and bits and pieces like that on the. I think they came on the Sky Cutter actually, which was an amazing model, floating on a cloud of magic. Although it was a pain in the bum to build, because you wanted to paint it in sub-assemblies, but it was you had to be very precise with it when you put it together.
I really liked your Northern Army, and I really like the seagulls about it. But I did have some unit first towards the end. I had the for my Moonstone of Hidden Ways, I had the Waystone in the Cygor kit from Beastmen.
Yeah, I got that. Where did I get that from? Did I get that from work? Yeah,
you had it in the bits box out the back.
It's funny. I thought of you the other day because I was looking online, and there's an STL now that you can download for 3D printing that is a perfect Moonstone of Hidden Ways.
Well, turn the 3D printer on.
No, I'm not printing you one. I'm not giving you that excuse. I'm too busy. It's not running at the moment, but it's been running hell for leather printing Warmaster again.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing at the moment. Like, I'm just doing the bases on spirits. Which you can't really see very well, unfortunately, because of the camera, but I'll take some photos of them.
They look really difficult to paint.
Oh, they were very hard, those. They were very hard. I am doing some skeletons as well, just so that it's not all just really easy stuff. But they've been sat here waiting to be based for ages, so you'll have to excuse me while I get on and just dry brush up the bases because it needs doing.
So, Jeremy, you always used to play Dark Elves throughout all of Warhammer Fantasy Battles from, I guess, the end of 5th, beginning of 6th, right up to the end times. But just before the end times, you did buy quite a few boxes of Bretonnians, didn't you?
Yeah, I kind of see the writing on the wall and kind of suspected I knew which armies they were probably going to pull the plug on. Although I always thought they were going to get rid of Beastmen as well, and I didn't. But I kind of knew that Bretts and Tomb Kings were going to go, so I decided to buy up enough boxes and army sets of Bretonnians to build an army at some point. And so I think I have now 5 battalions worth of like the core units and loads of special stuff. So it's all sitting on a bigger shelf.
That's basically the down payment for a mortgage, Jack.
I kind of did think that actually. Yeah, it's either a mortgage or my pension. You know, one or the other.
Yeah.
And I do miss like the sort of low fantasy vibe of Warhammer. So I do want to pull that together at some point, and I feel like probably the old world's a good time probably to sort of, if they are going to re-release Bretonnians, to sort of get those going again.
Oh, I'd love to see that, and I completely agree with you with that low fantasy vibe. I think nothing puts like the Warhammer fantasy universe in perspective, you know, like being the peasant digging in the mud out of Monty Python.
And then they got Pegasus Knight flying overhead or something.
Yeah.
We were talking about Dan's High Elf army, the Sea Guard force, and I just remember those games of the Dark Elves and then the High Elves playing against each other just being absolute carnage because both of them had so much shooting and so much firepower at each other, and both sides also had virtually no armor. So you just
Yeah.
had both armies, just elves falling over like 9-pins turn after turn, and you just look at the edges of the battlefield just to be mountains of dead, by the end of turn 1. And it was kind of like, in Blackadder Goes Forth, there's that scene where the generals are looking over this battlefield and they just get a dustpan and brush and just swipe the models into it. And it was kind of like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, just lethal, just everything, nothing stood up.
Mm.
In a way, that was actually easier to play against than the Empire, I found. I don't quite know why, but yeah, would much rather go against High Elves than Empire.
Yeah, there are certain things I always used to really. I can remember the first time I came across a steam tank, and it was just grinding my elves into a fine powder, and I was just like, "What do I do now?" And Dad's just like, "You don't do anything. You just get ground up." And that's just what it used to do. But it was it stubborn or unbreakable? I think it was unbreakable.
Unbreakable.
Yeah, once it was in, you were just there unless you fled. But if you fled, it was going to chase you down. It's not like in Age of Sigmar. If you flee, it's more of a move rather than an actual flee, and there's no response from your opponent to chase you down like there was then. So you couldn't flee, and if you got stuck in combat with it, you were just locked in, and there wasn't really. I think did it have a 1+ or a 2+ armor save?
1+, I think it was.
Yeah, I think it was 1+. So yeah, there's just no getting out of that really. But so there were some units that were difficult. I can remember I played Ben Chambers's Ogres, and they were a difficult matchup. But that was difficult in a different way because not only were they tough, but Ogres in 8th edition were able to deploy. I don't even know how this is possible, really, considering the game is played 6 foot wide, but they were able to deploy the whole width of the battlefield with no gaps and then march forward as like a solid mass. And then when your whole kind of tactic is built upon scouting and flanking and fast movers and flyers and things, and they're just like, there's no edges or space. That was really, really difficult.
A similar problem really with playing against Skaven, where you just have this massive models and you just go, I can't get around you, how do I flank charge you?
I had no problem playing against Skaven because the only Skaven player I ever played against was Larry, and his dice rolling is to this day legendary. Anytime he had to take a leadership test, he would invariably fail it and end up fleeing through his own units and all this sort of stuff, and then they'd just be gone.
I played against someone out of the Skaven army, and he took that plague furnace thing that makes you take toughness tests, and you don't want elves taking a toughness test. It's not going to end well, and it never did.
No. The Skaven range, I remember when they redid the Skaven range, it was absolutely brilliant when they redid it. They really, really did it justice. Although they didn't redo like the Night Runners or the Gutter Runners, and it was a bit weird because the aesthetic was totally different for the newer Skaven models and those ones. But they were really nice.
But there were always a few models that got left behind. But I think that's the difference between Games Workshop now and Games Workshop then, is that I feel like every edition of Warhammer Fantasy Battles that came along, there was a really big increase in quality of the models that were produced. And when they say redid your spearmen, except for the ones with the boxing gloves, but when they redid your units, you kind of felt like this was a big step forward, and aren't the new models fantastic, and don't they look amazing, or now they're a dual kit, and they were coming on leaps and bounds. But now I feel like they produce models of such a high quality that they don't need to spend their time redoing those models. They can just add to the range.
Yeah, definitely.
Just a shout out to the chat if you're watching. Let us know what your army was, what you used to play in Warhammer Fantasy Battles, what your greatest moment was. We'd love to hear it from you. I think the greatest moment I had again is in. Oh, there are two. One by proxy, and one is my own greatest moment, I suppose. So for all of it, as I said before, it felt like, and as Ben was saying in the chat, it feels like Wood Elves are a bit of an underdog army. But I always did all right with them, and that was a big part thanks to the Dwellers Below podcast, an Australian podcast that I used to listen to, and Nick Hohen, who is still an avid wargamer and came second in CanCon when the last CanCon was, which, if you don't know, Jeremy, is the biggest Warhammer Age of Sigmar tournament in the world. But he used to play Wood Elves. And there was a time in 7th edition where he won the Australian Masters with the Wood Elf 6th edition book. And it was like all the Wood Elf fans globally were just like so excited about it that they could actually be competitive. And he did it with a triple tree man list, which I don't think I ever took. But that was quite a high point by proxy, because it was really an underdog army for a long time. And that there was some sort of win out there was great. And the other, I think this was against Gareth. So Guy played Gareth and his undead, and he took quite a competitive undead list. He'd never played against Wood Elves in 8th edition, and he took Manfred von Carstein and all these other things. And I went. My Wild Riders, 5 Wild Riders, went into Manfred and Manfred's unit. And he was like, well, it doesn't matter, it's Manfred in a unit. And I killed Manfred on the charge, like outright, straight away. And that felt really good. And that was, that's kind of the thing that, like legends and songs are sang of. I think I killed Manfred and like half his unit. They were just... And then at that point, I think people were like, "Oh, this 8th edition Wood Elf book is pretty good, actually." But I think that, I think I remember that being the sort of greatest moment, I guess, that my army ever had, because I remember for so long there was like Hero Hammer and the main characters sort of dominating the meta and things, and to be able to have an army that a special unit could wipe one out, I was just like, whoa. Yeah, so those are my 2 moments, I guess.
One memory which I remember really strongly was going up against the Hell Pit Abomination, which was always an absolute pain in the ass to try and deal with. And I'd ended up coming up with a solution to it, which was give Witch Elves a flaming banner and just charge them straight in, because they're poisoned, so you're going to get enough 6s, and then if they're flaming, it can't regenerate, and just taking it out on the first turn. And no one could quite believe it actually happened, because it just was one of those things that just would not die. It would always come back to life again or hang around. So taking that out in 1 turn of combat, that I felt quite smug about.
Yeah.
I
can remember.
Like artillery.
Sorry to interrupt, Dan, but I can remember, just along what Jeremy's saying, like the strategizing and stuff. Do you remember? I don't know if you ever played the game, but when Nagash came out with his new model in the end times, you had a game lined up against him, and we spent ages. We spent me and Dan were housemates, and we spent a good couple of evenings just strategizing and trying to work out what could be done against him. And we came out with this idea of a council of light mages, because they did extra searing damage. And we worked out that on a lucky roll, if you took, because it was also every light mage would amplify the other light mage. That was kind of how they worked. And we worked out if he took 6 or something stupid like that on the first turn, they could all like focus their searing beams into him and kill him outright in the first turn. But it had about a 50% chance of success. And
I've still got them all painted.
I remember that, but the strategizing and the theory hammer was a big part of the hobby for me.
Yeah,
sorry, Dan, I'll let you go on.
I've still got my whole high elf army, actually. There's a couple of bits need repairing, mainly on the sky cutters. But yeah, I've still got them. No, I think I was trying to think of like memorable moments. I think most of them were usually when I used artillery and managed to hit something back when you had to guess. So I remember sniping a a lone dark rider with a mortar, backing cross swords, and guessing directly onto his head. That was a good time. And cannons as well. Invariably, that was always good. I think one of the things, like, until really my high elves, I suppose, certainly with my empire and my dwarves before that, I always felt really constrained by like painting. I enjoy it more now than I ever did, but I was never massively into painting. But I wanted a painted army, and I remember like wanting big units of X, Y, and Z, but just never getting them done. Certainly Empire, I know it just felt painful trying to paint stuff, and then it just all die. And the dwarves. So I'm quite excited to revisit those projects, but now with I like painting more. I know a lot more techniques, and the products that are available make things a lot more accessible. It's going to be tough to decide what to do, really, because I've got a big love for chaos now, that I didn't have before. I love high elves, but dwarves and empire, I think it's going to be between those two.
And if you didn't want to paint too much, you could always do your dwarven concept army that you came up with.
I loved that concept, and I was going to do that. I was going to do a ghost army, right, for dwarves, where the characters were painted properly, and they were like basically calling on the spirits of their ancestors, which was inspired by, there was a Gotrek and Phoenix book, I think it was, and I'm sure they went to Karak 8 Peaks, and essentially all the ancestor ghosts came out of the hold and started kicking ass. But Dan mocked me for trying to like do something really easy, so I didn't do it.
Well, it was just the idea that he would get a whole army and just get the whatever it is, the oxide paint, and just wash them all down and be like, "Yep,
yeah, all done."
But actually, I think you're right now. I think thematically, it is actually quite a cool idea, and if you get the hero models exactly right, then it could work.
Yeah, I know, but I would love to do dwarves. I always loved dwarves. I thought they were ace. Like, I love the idea of them.
Well, I've started to paint Tomb Kings. I'm halfway through a unit of spearmen, and I finished a hero. But I would quite like to do Empire. But I would quite like to do Wood Elves as well and revisit them. There's just too many options, really. But I kind of know what aesthetic that I want for each of them in my mind. In my mind's eye, I could see all the finished projects in a way, which again is lethal, isn't it? Because
I quite want to see like what comes out and then follow it. So like, get the starter set and paint an army from the starter set, and then collect along as they kind of release things and do things. But then that was my approach. That was my approach with Age of Sigmar, I didn't convert my high elf army over. I put it away and then went in and did something brand new. So I'd kind of like to do that, I think.
Me and Tom have said that we'd both buy the starter box, and then whichever army we liked, we'd exchange the other half. So we'd have two sets of the starter army each.
It would just be quite nice to see what areas of armies or completely different races they just sort of bring out, just so that we can start to explore. There's bits of the old world that we've never seen before. So whether they have like an army for like a particular empire city or Bretonnian city or whatever it's going to be. So that'd be quite cool. Although I would focus on the Bretts. I would be really pleased if they did a zombie pirate army, and obviously because they are sort of like tying into the Total War games.
They did.
I would imagine they would do it
eventually. Thing, didn't they? Do you remember they did a few metal ones like?
Yeah, there was an old White Dwarf army, wasn't
there, and stuff like that.
They're called the Vampire Coasts, aren't they? And they've got some really interesting units. They've got like bloated bodies that like blow up and things like, and cause massive damage to people. They're very cool. And do you know what? There's no one who wouldn't want a zombie pirate army. There isn't anyone. I don't know if they've missed a boat with it now, because it did
would have
used
been
to
big
be
when
Pirates
what
of the
were the films
Caribbean.
called? Pirates of the Caribbean, yeah.
Yeah, and there used to be a bit of a trend for that in Games Workshop releases, where they would sort of follow aesthetics that were popular in other media, especially in 40k. I noticed that, but
I think it was most prevalent in Lord of the Rings.
yes.
Yeah. Oh, where was I going to go with that? Oh, yeah. I would like it if they did. I know we were going to wax lyrical about what we did, but now I'm just talking about what I'd like to see. But they did a little focus on the border princes recently, didn't they? And of course, the Dogs of War, were quite a thing in the border princes. And I always fondly remember the Dogs of War because they were in the first White Dwarf I ever bought. So issue 225 was the issue, a long time ago now. And I remember Arsenal, the Dragon Lord, was in there, and the Birdman. Do you remember the Birdman?
Yeah, do you know what?
Cool.
When I did the Old World episode with Tom about the Border Princes, we were talking about the Birdmen.
Yeah, they were ace.
Because a lot of the Border Princes are like exiled lords from different places, and I was saying, do you think the Birdmen were like in such a bind from where they were? They've become so corrupt, or the people had like revolted against them over in Tilia or something, and they just flew over into the Border Princes.
Yeah, and then you had like a Katani Fellowship who had like pikes. Because I always thought, like, I kind of get it, but the Empire, why they wouldn't have pikes? You just would have pikes. In fact, I think in a lot of the background they have pikes, but they never had them in the game. And I know Foundry Miniatures did like pikemen, but in the style of Empire. Although, wasn't really, because the Empire, I suppose, were in the style of sort of Landsknecht, was it called? I'm unsurprisingly poor at pronouncing foreign things.
You do English pretty well for a Cornishman.
But yeah, so I would like to see some Dogs of War. I'd like to see it all, to be honest. I'm really excited by it. Just really excited by it.
But would you like to see?
Don't want Wood Elves.
Would you like to see Ind and Araby and all those sorts of things explored eventually as well?
Yeah, I like the stuff from Total War for Cathay. Thought that was really nice. I don't know. Maybe I'm not massively bothered, because I feel like for new aesthetics, we've been really spoilt with Age of Sigmar, and we've had loads of new aesthetics. And actually, what I want to do is revisit the Warhammer world that we knew and loved. And like Jeremy, like I really like the low fantasy, like the Empire. It was basically like wandering around Tudor Britain, but then you'd walk around the corner and be an orc or something, and be like, "Oh, what flipping heck? What's going on?" Which, to be fair, it was not unlike a night out in Plymouth. But I think, yeah, I'm more keen for them to explore or re-explore with the kind of miniatures technology now and the painting availability, the stuff we knew before, like the dwarf holds and Bretonia, and it would be great to go through, like, because isn't it set like around the time of Leon Orcslayer?
Yeah,
and all of that, and the build up to the war against chaos with Magnus the Pious, and
yeah. That's well, I say only, but that's 100 years away. So chaos is gathering in its strength at that time. So again, that's a good opportunity to do a chaos army. But I don't think people really realize how powerful chaos is about to become. I think they think a lot of people in the Empire might think that they're fairly safe at the moment, because it is, in the lifespan of an average person living in the Empire, it's probably 2 lifetimes away that it's going to happen.
Yeah, and also, isn't it like, so this is at the end of a period where there was like no emperor, or no one emperor. So like there was the time of 3 emperors, and then at one point there was 4 emperors, and
Or at the moment, there's none, and all the provinces are run by their own individual burgomeisters.
Yeah. Which is madness.
Which I think, again, is one of the things that's going to be interesting, is because that gives them the opportunity to sort of like add more flavour to each individual region, because it's all going to be sort of like more micro level.
Yeah, I'd love to do Stirland, green and blue. Green and blue. It's not green and blue. That's Nordland. Green and yellow.
I'd do Tal if I was up to it. Talabime.
Yeah, well, so Stirland had Talabime in it. So Talabime was like the city and had its own standing army, which they did for, I think, 6th Ed Warhammer. They used them as the Empire sort of poster boys. So that was the white and the red guys.
Mm.
And Talabime was cool because it was like in the middle of a forest, but it was like in the bowl of a huge crater where a meteor had hit. And the walls of Talabime were like built on the edges of the crater where it had like risen up. So that was pretty cool. But that was and then Stirland was like the state. Around.
What was also cool about Talabime, but I don't know that they ever needed this, but the crater was massive. Like the radius of it was like miles. So inside the city was like right in the epicenter, but then on the outside of that, even inside the walls, was still farmland and things like that. So if there was ever a siege, they basically could just hold up indefinitely. They'd just be all right.
Yeah.
But I don't think that it ever came to that. But of course they did. We are coming out of a period now where they had the war against the von Carsteins, as the Empire's just recovering from that.
Yeah. Evil vampire dudes.
See, they'd be cool to see as well, and you could very easily use the range that they've just released, Rage Sigmar, for that.
Yeah, I do kind of wonder whether they will try and future-proof Age Sigmar ranges, so that's kind of like backwards compatible.
Well, there's talk, Jeremy, of next year us seeing Chaos Dwarves come back for Age Sigmar.
Oh my god, that would be amazing! I love the Babylonian field to them. Yes.
So if that does happen, they could be a crossover army, much like the new Soul Blight Gravelords feel they could be a crossover army, and they've got bats that you would want to actually build and paint, and not just have a bit of paper. There it is. It's your Felbat unit, Jeremy.
Blue pack, and it's got a bit of card on it. There you go.
You've kept it all these years.
I'll be interested to see how it goes, in as much as a couple of things really. So firstly, they've said that they're going to do rules so you can use your old armies, which is great. But also, ultimately they need to sell stuff for this new game for it to continue. So it's no good everybody just using their old army and then all they do is sell a few rule books and then that's it. So it'll be interesting to see whether they completely refresh a whole range or they add things into previous miniatures. And then it'll also be interesting to see what the kind of feel is like at events, etc. for the game. So when Age of Sigmar came out, they actually made a thing about it needing to be fun and essentially flushed out a load of grumpy people, including Jeremy, from the game and tried to get this more light-hearted feel. And then I just wonder how how that will go and whether that will continue. And that all those people can just carry on and play 9th Age. And
but I think it would be there was a lot of light-heartedness in the old world, in the character of particularly the older models. It wasn't all this low fancy doom and gloom, being out stuck in the rain as a peasant whilst the Lord's commanded you. There was a lot of sneaky gits and stuff like that, and if they could recapture some of the charm of that, I think it would be brilliant. And I'd like to see them recapture some of the randomness as well, like the animosity in units and things like that.
Ben's I don't know if he's just said it, I've just looked, but about Dryad aspects. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I like that.
Oh, where they shapeshifted into different trees. That was cool.
Do you remember when they did? he wrote about night kebabs, which I remember that sort of thing. But it made me. I read it as kobolds for a minute there, and that made me reminded me of when they did the kobold list. Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
It wasn't kobold. It was some noblars, wasn't it? Like an army of noblars, but there were kobolds in there, and then they did like rules for kobolds riding other kobolds to be like knights. Remember that? And they were like on the shoulders. That was.
There were little things that you could do that were fun. I mean, I don't know if any of you remember there were Lord Kindreds for Wood Elves, and one of the Kindreds back in the day was the Altar Kindred.
Yeah.
And he had like a stupid move, like an 18-inch move or something stupid.
Yeah.
Basically could teleport across the table. And I could just looking through Azra again. So this is a game I played against Empire. So this would have been against Graham, I think. 1,500 points. And I took an Eagle Hero with the Dragon Helm and a Great Weapon to get the extra strength. 4 units of 8 Dryads, 5 Treekin, a Tree Man, a level 4 Sorcerer, and an Altar Kindred with additional hand weapon and potion of strength. And my takeaway from the battle was the highlight was definitely the Altar Kindred. He had 5 attacks and charged after drinking the potion of strength. Then I gave him Savage Beast of Horrors, and he had 8 strength 10 attacks.
Oh dear.
But that's how you. That was the way to defeat knights back in the day. As you can see, there was no Glade Guard in that list at all. Just
I remember
just
when
fighting monsters.
going into Games Workshop really early on. Might have gone with you, actually, Jeremy. It was like can't have been old. We must have been like 12, 13, something like that. And watching a game of Warhammer Fantasy, and I just remember these Bretonnian knights against like a mass of skinks, and nothing happened for like 4 turns because the knights had charged and like earlier on in the game, and they basically were just wailing on these skinks, which wouldn't die because they couldn't wound them because they no magic items or anything. It's just you only had like 1 attack each. You didn't roll very many dice. And then like the knights obviously had a 2-up save. And it just for 4 turns, nothing happened. And for some reason that made me buy a packet of Beastmen. I don't know why. Like, I don't know quite what it was that I found, which was interesting when you compared it with one of my first memories of 40k when I went into the store, and they gave me a tank to use, and I blew up an orc war buggy. And it was quite distinctly different. I always remembered that because then when I was doing intro games, I always used to try and like insert some really exciting stuff moments into fantasy and make sure it all happened on the charge. Really, you don't want it to be drawn out.
I mean, I think this is the thing about fantasy, isn't it? You want to fix the problems it had with movement and make it a bit faster, smoother, funnier, randomer. Those are the kind of things you want to sort of make sure that you bring to it. But no slogs.
Yeah, the setting was always great, wasn't it? To be honest, the setting was great. But yeah, there's some stuff that would benefit from being fixed, as you say, Jeremy.
Movement, you're completely right, and this is coming from someone who used to exploit the issues in movement quite a lot, by taking great eagles and parking them in front of people, and then big unwieldy units. All of a sudden, your horde unit that's got, that is basically the size of a shoebox put on the table, has to reverse wield and can't do anything, or it can charge the eagle, which will then flee anyway. They become quite unstuck, and I think that is something that needs to be addressed. Whether or not we'll have these big horde units still or not is something we'll have to see. Ben's asked, do we think that armies will be a similar size to 6th or 7th edition or closer to 8th? I have a feeling that they'll use 8th as the launching pad because they've alluded in one of the articles that they've written rules for Cathay units as if they were 8th edition. But they did say that they were going to take the best from all editions. So don't really know. I don't know that I want to see hordes in particular. I think a unit of 2025 is...
I don't think they will keep the horde rule. I think they probably shrink it back down to something like 6th or 7th edition. I think most people recognise that as soon as you ask people to sort of have 40 strong units, that it put a lot of people off, and a lot of people went, no thanks, I can't be bothered to do that. I think it's too. It is, painting is, a barrier for many people, and I think the higher that barrier is, the harder you're going to get people to actually buy into the game system. It's far more accessible to say, oh, you only need a unit size of 10 than it is to say a unit size of 50.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think one of the challenges, I guess, is because the units are base to base, their sort of visual presence is not the same. So, like, I wonder what they'll do. So like if you painted 20 Space Marines, the area of the battlefield and the sort of sense of wow fulfillment that you get is going to be bigger. Whereas like to do the same in Warhammer Fantasy, like you said, you had to paint like 30, 40, 50 guys, and it's just ridiculous. Time-wise, if nothing else.
Well, bring on the unit fillers and they'll be done in no time.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like Tom is going to make it to join us. I've messaged him a couple of times, but I don't know where he is. But he is he's very snowed under with work and family and stuff like that. So I think I might share a memory that I had of him playing because he's not here. There's two, I think, I remember. I was talking with me and Dan at breakfast this morning, and we were talking about this, is that he was playing, he had orcs and goblins, and he was playing in Games Workshop, and he was playing against Graham, who's an old housemate of mine, who had Empire. And Graham had 2 units of Empire Knights. I can't remember which kind of Knights they were, but I think they were 2 units of 5 or 2 units of 10. And he moved them up, and Tom had his Mangler Squig that had gone up the table, and then Graham had moved his Knights up. But the space between the units was smaller than the base size of the Mangler Squig, so the Mangler Squig could go through that gap and clip both of them. And as he put them down, I think I just went something like, "Oh God!" Like, and Tom looked at me like, "What are you doing? Like, the movement phase isn't over yet." Like, he could notice, but luckily for Tom, he didn't notice, and he didn't. I don't think he even realised that I was like, basically just had my doing the Picard maneuver, just a. and the next turn,
I'm glad we got a Star Trek reference in.
Lo and behold, the Mangler Squig went straight over both units and just completely obliterated them. And there was like helmet over here, horse leg over there, just took them completely off.
I think one of my favourite memories of playing against Tom was when he had his Dwarf army, and I used to take this. This is back when I actually had the model, can you believe, of a Black Pegasus, and I used to mount a noble on it. He was kind of like on the forums, he was kind of called like Captain Scarlet because it's virtually indestructible.
I remember him. He's the one that if you use like a higher strength or something, his toughness would go up or something. Is it like that?
Yeah, his ward save would be higher the more powerful the attack against him was. And I sort of had him ready basically to sort of like to go and dispatch like war machines, attack the Dwarf cannons. But turn 1, the cannon spotted him, fired a cannonball, landed straight on his head, went straight through the ward, sent him flying back against a tree in the wood, completely took him out. This was a cannon, was actually like a sniper rifle. And I was like, guess I won't be using him anymore. But that was such a good shot, such good estimating. Yeah.
I miss dwarf cannons. It's weird to me that they don't still make them and they don't still exist, because in you won't know, Jeremy, but in Warhammer Age of Sigmar, we've got the Cities of Sigmar, which is the army that I collect, and it's all the different remnants of the armies that don't really have a place to go, I suppose, from Warhammer Fantasy battles are in the cities, and they all live together. Believe it or not, the War of the Beard has been long forgotten, and dwarves and
they still don't really like each other, though.
Yeah, I suppose so, but they live together, and there's a city. Is it Greywater Fastness? Is the city? Yeah, and they're in the realm of life, but Alariel, who's the goddess of life, and all the Sylvaneth don't really like them because basically all the way around the city is just a massive like crater because the walls are lined with cannons, and anything that comes up to them is just obliterated by these cannons, and it's just a wasteland where nothing can live and nothing can grow. It's just black powder and smoke. But they don't produce a cannon model in Age of Sigmar anymore.
Yeah, that is.
I try not to look at how many models from 8th edition are no longer available to buy because it just makes it a little bit sad because there were some very nice sculpts, as well as some less good ones. But I try not to think about it. I'm just
Dark Elf range is still
it's
very
pretty much
intact.
mostly intact. Yeah, so I'm very lucky in that respect. But I feel like
the Chaos range is very much intact. The Vampire range is very much intact still.
I thought that with the Dark Elves, one of the shames was when they redid the Executioners into plastic. I just don't think they look anything like as cool as the ones you had, Jeremy. Although, those blades, what on earth? Trying to get them to stay on was just ridiculous, wasn't it?
They are the hardest pinning job I've ever done, by far. But they do look cool. I think it's also a shame when you have dual kits because you end up compromising on what you could do with both unit types.
Yeah, and I think the new dragons are an example of that because they both Karazai and I can't remember what the other one's called now. Crondus, yeah, because they both have. You won't be able to see because of how but they both have a wing outstretched like this, and then if they're side by side, they're basically I don't know. It's almost like they're dabbing. They've both got their wing out.
Yeah, they are
because they're dancing. Yeah, that's kind of how they look. But there are other kits that do you know what? I think that the Eternal Guard and Wildwood Ranger dual kit is fine. I think the head swap and the weapon swap is fine there, really.
They work well, yeah.
Too much.
It's okay if you're not trying to go too different, I guess, because like the Empire, obviously you had one kit that made like swordsman, spearman. Although actually saying that, I say that, but I'm going to disagree with myself now because I don't think that I think the spearmen and the halberdiers looked fine crossing over, but the swordsmen always looked a bit weird because their arms were set by what you needed for a spearman. So that was a bit weird.
I feel like that didn't matter because I felt like they were like the militia and they were the state troops, whatever you want to call them, and they were just armed differently. So the fact that the aesthetic between them and the uniform was the same, I just think that was normal because they were all the same unit, just armed differently.
Yeah, but it was the pose. The way they were posed, holding a sword and a shield, was a bit weird. But anyway, they're going to have pikes in the new rules.
I think they should get rid of halberd and shield. I don't get this. You're carrying your shield and your halberd.
Well, because you got your shield for when you're like advancing across the table. Of course, you want to get rid of the shield, you shooting loon, and you wood elves.
I think that the only unit that should be able to have a halberd and a shield is Temple Guard because they're modelled having a halberd and shield, and in the rules they couldn't have a halberd and shield for a while because even though they are modelled with it, but this. You put your halberd away and you're marching up with your shield. Rubbish. And you put your shield on your back and you get your halberd. It's too clunky. I think just get rid of it.
Chaos Warriors can have both because they're Chaos Warriors and they're massive.
Yeah, that's true. But we'll just have to wait and see. I think that's taken us to an hour and a quarter now, so I think we'll round it out there. But we'll have plenty more Old World shows back in the new year. There's always going to be more to talk about. I think there is going to be quite a lot dropped about the game next year. We are going to see Total War 3 come out in February. So when that drops, Games Workshop would be foolish not to try and tie in and build on what we see from that by releasing things and start to build the hype for the game, even if the game isn't quite ready to drop simultaneously with it.
Maybe Christmas Day. That's what they should give us for our Christmas present. That'd be amazing.
But I am hopeful that the game will come out in 2022 and not 2023.
Oh yeah.
just from a couple of things that I've heard, obviously the last set of rumours that we did said it was pushed back to 2023 because of COVID, but I do think that it might be coming out next year. I mean, just from a couple of other things that I've heard. So hopefully that will be the case. So get your Bretonians up to a decent standard, Jeremy. Otherwise, your brother won't play you, and you won't have anything to play when it drops.
It is a good incentive, though. It's a good kick up the arse, actually, to get back into the hobby.
Because we want to be playing when it drops, don't we? We want to be getting those armies together as soon as possible.
But that's the good thing. I've still got the whole High Elf army, so I'll have an army to play with from the get-go.
Oh, we were going to play with that, Jeremy, weren't we? We were going to do a High Elf versus Dark Elf army where I was going to borrow Dan's High Elf. So we should do that as well in the new year. Try and post a battle report.
You see, and there's a proper incentive to get stuff painted if you want to post share it with the wider internet. No space to facilitate models there, is there?
All right. Well, thank you, everybody who joined us. Thanks for watching. Wish you a very Merry Christmas, and we will be back in the new year.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.